morning. Earlier, I spoke to the senior Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Adam Schiff, who's one of the leading figures investigating Russian interference in the 2016 election. I began by asking him about those comments from Alexander Nix that sounded so dismissive of their efforts to discover what Cambridge Analytica had been doing and how his committee didn't have jurisdiction over the activities of Alexander Nix.
Well, a couple things. First, it's certainly within our jurisdiction if we had a foreign firm that was using the essentially stolen data of tens of millions of Americans to target them in a political campaign. That's very much our business. And if the data analytic arm of the Trump campaign had contacts with Russia, we know that they made overtures to WikiLeaks to try to obtain stolen Clinton emails.
To Julian Assange, indeed.
To Julian Assange. This is all very much within our jurisdiction. In terms of Mr. Nix, I have serious questions about the truthfulness of his testimony. If Cambridge Analytica brought on this researcher and did so for the purpose of illegally acquiring data on tens of millions of Americans in a way that they could not have either afforded or gotten with the kind of haste that they needed, we need to know about it.
Are you fearful that he might have perjured himself in his appearance before your committee?
There are certainly statements that he made during his testimony that are inconsistent with the reports that we're hearing from the whistleblower, and we've invited Mr. Wiley to come and testify before our committee. He has accepted that invitation.
Do you need Alexander Nix to come back as well?
We should have him come back, and what's more, we'll need to look at the information as we learn it to determine whether he was telling the truth when he testified before our committee already.
I mean, in his comments, he says, look, the Democrats, it's all about sour grapes, that they basically want to decertify the results of the election because they're sore losers. What's your response to that?
Well, this is basically the president's narrative that he wants to tell. Our intelligence community tells a very different story. We know what the Russians did. We know much about how they did it, but there's still a great deal we don't know. And some of those answers may be held by Cambridge Analytica, and we're determined to get to the bottom of them. And Mr. Nix's repetition of the president's talking points isn't going to prevent us from doing so.
I understand that there is to be a Facebook briefing. Facebook is now in demand, very much in demand in this building. I think they're due to brief as many as 7 committees over the next few days. What do you need to hear from them?
Well, a great many things. Vis-a-vis Cambridge Analytica, when did they discover that their data had been misappropriated? What steps did they take to audit and make sure that the data, in fact, had been destroyed? Why is Cambridge Analytica only being suspended now? Why wasn't action taken earlier? What obligation did they feel that they had to report to their users about the compromise of their data? Was there any report made? What do they know now about the Russian use of their platforms? We continue to learn more. They must be in a far better position to learn more than even we. We are still trying to publish the ads that the Russians placed on their platforms and need their further assistance in scrubbing those ads for personal information and explaining why other ads have been scrubbed in ways that appears to overshoot the mark.
I mean, disappearing evidence, as you describe, this means, as we understand it from Cambridge Analytica and from Alexander Nix, of trying to kind of appear and seamlessly, if you like, flood the internet with messaging that's unattributable, that's untrackable. I mean, it really feels like the dark arts are kind of permeating the democratic world at the moment. How do you even begin to stem that?
Well, it's certainly true, and to see the good reporting that you've done with Alexander Nix talking about how they can inject things into the bloodstream, they can create these fake pages and whatnot. He's basically describing the Russian active measures campaign on social media. There were Facebook embeds in Cambridge Analytica. We need to find out how much they knew. Were they aware that Facebook data was being used? But also we need to expose not just what the Russians did, but what firms like Cambridge Analytica did, so that consumers of information, users of these social media platforms can understand just how much misinformation and propaganda is out there. As Nix would explain to your undercover crew, the key is for them to hide their hand. and not to reveal that it's propaganda, because people do ask once it's discovered it's propaganda, okay, who's paying for that propaganda? Yes, the dark arts have arrived in full force online.